"Excuse me, are you sure you're in the right place?" The voice was slick with manufactured concern, a razor blade wrapped in silk. It sliced through the quiet hum of the exclusive airport lounge, a space designed to insulate its occupants from the common chaos of travel. The old man, who had been staring at the swirling patterns in his lukewarm coffee, looked up slowly. His eyes, the color of a faded winter sky, held no surprise, only a deep, abiding weariness. He was dressed in worn-out jeans, a flannel shirt that had seen better decades, and a dark, nondescript field jacket that was frayed at the cuffs and collar. On his feet were a pair of scuffed leather boots, the kind that molded to a man's feet only after 1,000 miles of hard living. He looked less like a first-class passenger and more like a ghost who had wandered in from a forgotten highway. The man who had spoken, a polished specimen in a tailored navy suit and shoes that cost more than the old man's entire wardrobe, gestured vaguely around the opulent room. "This is the Centurion first-class lounge, you see, for Platinum members. Perhaps you were looking for the food court?" The old man, whose name was Jedediah, simply blinked. He offered no defense, no explanation. His hands, gnarled and liver-spotted, remained wrapped around his ceramic mug, finding a small measure of warmth in the porcelain. His silence seemed to irritate the businessman, whose name was Richard Sterling, and who considered himself a gatekeeper of propriety and status. Sterling's smile tightened. "Look, I don't want to make a scene, but rules are rules. We pay a premium for this kind of quiet, this exclusivity. Your presence is rather disruptive." He said the word presence as if it were a foul odor. Jedediah took a slow sip of his coffee. The liquid was bitter, but he didn't seem to notice. He had tasted far worse things in his life. He finally lowered the mug and met Sterling's gaze. His voice, when it came, was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "My ticket says this is the right place." He didn't elaborate. He didn't show the ticket. He simply stated a fact, leaving it to hang in the air between them. This calm refusal to be intimidated was, to Sterling, the greatest offense of all. It was defiance. He scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "A ticket? I highly doubt that. More likely you slipped past the attendant while she was distracted. It happens. But I'm not so easily fooled." He looked around for support, his eyes scanning the other passengers who were now pretending not to watch the unfolding drama. He flagged down a young attendant, a woman named Chloe, with a nervous smile. "Excuse me, miss, I think we have a vagrant problem." Lieutenant Commander David Grant, U.S. Navy, felt the confrontation before he truly saw it. It was a disturbance in the force field of the room, a spike of tension in an atmosphere of curated calm. He had just stepped into the lounge, his dress uniform feeling stiff and foreign after weeks in tactical gear. He was on the final leg of a long journey home from a deployment that had been all sand, sweat, and the low hum of anxiety. All he wanted was a quiet corner, a bottle of water, and 15 minutes of peace before his final flight to San Diego, where his wife and 2 kids were waiting. Christmas was in 2 days. He saw the scene immediately. The expensive suit, puffed up with indignation, and the old man, seemingly collapsed in on himself. A small island of stillness in a sea of Sterling's making. Grant's first uncharitable thought was that the suit had a point. The old man did look out of place. He looked like he'd been sleeping in his clothes for a week. But then Grant's training kicked in, the part of his brain that didn't just see, but observed. He saw past the worn fabric and the gray stubble. He saw the man's posture. It wasn't the defeated slump of a homeless man. It was a state of profound energy conservation. A body at rest but not relaxed. Alert. He saw the man's eyes, how they scanned the room without seeming to move, taking in the exits, the people, the angles. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to a man like Grant, it was as clear as a signal flare in the night. This was not a man who had simply wandered in, This was a man who knew exactly where he was at all times. The young attendant, Chloe, approached Jedediah, her expression a painful mix of professional duty and genuine embarrassment. "Sir, I am so sorry to bother you, but this gentleman, could I just see your boarding pass again, please?" Her voice was a whisper. Jedediah didn't seem to hold her responsible. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, his movements slow and deliberate, not with the fumbling of age, but with the economy of motion that comes from a lifetime of purpose. As he shifted, the left sleeve of his jacket turned just so, catching the soft, recessed lighting of the lounge. For a split second, a small, dark patch became visible. It was almost completely faded, a circle of black fabric no bigger than a silver dollar sewn just below the shoulder. It was so worn that its details were nearly erased by time. Grant, watching from across the room, squinted. His interest peaked from professional curiosity to something sharper, more focused. Most old veterans wore their service on their sleeves, literally. Division patches, unit crests, VFW hats. This was different. It was small, unassuming, almost hidden. It wasn't meant to be seen. Sterling, meanwhile, was growing louder, enjoying his role as the enforcer of standards. "See, he's hesitating. He doesn't have a ticket. I knew it. Just call security and have him removed. This is unacceptable. I'm going to file a complaint about the lapse in security." He gestured at Jedediah as if he were an exhibit. "Look at that filthy jacket. God knows where it's been. Probably picked it out of a dumpster." It was that gesture, that final, contemptuous flick of the wrist, that caused Jedediah to turn his shoulder fully toward Grant's line of sight. The light hit the patch perfectly. Grant felt the air leave his lungs in a sudden, sharp hiss. His body went rigid. The background noise of the lounge, the soft clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, the distant announcement of a flight to London, all of it dissolved into a roaring silence in his ears. He wasn't looking at a piece of fabric anymore. He was looking at a ghost. The patch was a simple black circle. In its center was a single, five-pointed star, stitched in what was once white thread, now yellowed with age. Beneath the star, so faded they were practically invisible, were a date and a set of coordinates. But Grant didn't need to read them. He knew. He knew because he had seen a high-resolution photograph of one of the 6 original patches during a classified history briefing at Naval Special Warfare Development Group. It was shown for precisely 10 seconds, a slide in a presentation about the bloody, secret origins of their craft. The briefing officer had called it the Christmas Eve Patch. It was given to the 6 members of MACV-SOG Studies and Observations Group, Spike Team Dakota, for a single direct action mission on December 24, 1968. Operation Winter Star. The mission was a complete disaster and a legendary success. They were sent deep into Laos to rescue a downed F-4 pilot. They found him, but they were compromised and surrounded by an entire North Vietnamese Army battalion. Their extraction was impossible. For 18 hours, they held a small, muddy hilltop, calling in airstrikes on their own position. They bought enough time for a secondary rescue team to extract the pilot. The official record stated that all 6 members of Spike Team Dakota were lost, their bodies never recovered, their names etched onto a classified annex of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. They were ghosts, phantoms, and the old man in the flannel shirt was wearing their marker. Grant's mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible reality before him. He felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. The men of SOG were the forefathers of his own SEAL community. They were legends whispered about in training barracks, their exploits the stuff of almost mythical reverence. They wrote the book on unconventional warfare with their own blood. To meet one, it was like an art history student stumbling upon Leonardo da Vinci sketching in a coffee shop. It simply didn't happen. Sterling's voice, now shrill and grating, broke through Grant's shock. "Well, where is it?" Lost your fake ticket, old man. Or did you eat it? The cruelty was astounding. Grant watched Jedediah's face. There was no anger, no fear, no shame. Just a profound, impenetrable calm. It was the look of a man who had faced down horrors Sterling couldn't even imagine in his worst nightmares. A spoiled businessman in an airport lounge was less than nothing. He was a mild, atmospheric annoyance like a fly buzzing near a sleeping lion. Grant recognized that look, too. It was the calm that comes after the storm, the tranquility of a man who had survived the unsurvivable and now existed on a different plane of existence from everyone else. He had seen it once or twice before in the eyes of old, decorated operators. It was the look of someone who knew the final, terrible secret of the world and had made his peace with it. The security guards arrived, 2 large men in crisp uniforms. They looked uncomfortable, clearly not relishing the task of ejecting an old man in front of an audience. "Sir," one of them said, his voice gentle, "we need you to come with us." That was it. Grant couldn't stand by any longer. It felt like a sacrilege. He pushed himself off the wall he'd been leaning against and began to walk forward, his polished black shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. Every head in the lounge turned to watch him, the crisp navy uniform a beacon of authority. But before he could reach the small, tense group, another presence made itself known. The automatic glass doors to the lounge slid open with a soft whoosh, admitting a man who radiated an even greater aura of command. He was in his late 50s, wearing the uniform of an Air Force Major General, 2 silver stars gleaming on each shoulder. An aide, a young captain, trailed a half-step behind him. The general's eyes swept the room, and like Grant, he immediately zeroed in on the disturbance, his brow furrowed in disapproval. An officer of his rank didn't get involved in petty squabbles, but the sight of 2 security guards looming over a frail-looking old man while another man in a suit gloated clearly struck a nerve. General Peterson was his name, and he was from a generation that still remembered Vietnam, not as history, but as a current event that had shaped their world. He started walking toward the scene, his stride purposeful. Grant intercepted him, snapping to attention. "General Peterson, sir. Lieutenant Commander Grant, U.S. Navy." The general gave him a quick, appraising nod. "At ease, Commander. What in the world is going on here?" Grant kept his voice low, for the general's ears only. "Sir, I think we are in the presence of a living legend, and he is being treated with profound disrespect." He gestured with his chin toward Jedediah. "The old man in the jacket, sir." General Peterson looked over Grant's shoulder, his gaze sharpening. He saw what Grant saw, the worn clothes, the tired posture. But he also saw the quiet dignity, the absolute refusal to be cowed. He was too far away to see the patch, but his instincts told him Grant was right. There was something about the old man. "Explain, Commander," the general said, his voice a low rumble. At that moment, Sterling, seeing the arrival of a general, decided to press his advantage, assuming the high-ranking officer would be an ally in restoring order. "General, thank goodness you're here," he said, stepping forward officiously. "I was just telling these security officers that this man has no business being in here. He's a homeless person, a security risk." General Peterson's eyes, cold as blue steel, shifted to Sterling. He held up a single, silencing hand without even looking at him fully. His entire focus was on what Grant was saying. "Sir," Grant continued, his voice tight with emotion, "look at his left sleeve, the small, black patch." The general squinted, taking a step closer. The security guards parted respectfully to let him through. He leaned in, his eyes tracing the faded threads. For a moment, there was nothing but the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then the general's back went ramrod straight. A look of pure, unadulterated shock washed over his face. He whispered a single name, a name that was a ghost on the wind of history. Spike Team Dakota. He looked at Grant, his eyes wide. Christmas Eve, 68, Operation Winter Star. Grant nodded grimly. Yes, sir. The general straightened up, turning his full attention to Jedediah. His entire demeanor had changed. The stern, commanding officer was gone, replaced by something akin to awe. He looked at the old man not as a subordinate or a civilian, but as one would look upon a holy relic. He then turned to Sterling, and the ice returned to his eyes, magnified 100-fold. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer a whisper. It was a crack of thunder that echoed through the dead silent lounge, each word a hammer blow of judgment. You, he began, pointing a finger at Sterling. Stand right there. You don't move. You don't speak. You listen. He then addressed the entire room. For the last 10 minutes, you've all had the privilege of witnessing an act of profound ignorance. This gentleman, he said, his voice ringing with power as he gestured to Jedediah, was just accused of being a vagrant, a security risk. He was mocked for his clothes and his silence. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Let me tell you who you've been looking at. He took a deep breath. In 1968, on Christmas Eve, a 6-man Special Forces team was sent into a part of Laos so dangerous it was known as the Devil's Anvil. Their mission was to rescue a downed pilot who was surrounded by an entire battalion of North Vietnamese soldiers, over 700 of them. This team, Spike Team Dakota, was comprised of the toughest, most resourceful men our nation has ever produced. His voice grew thick with emotion. They were discovered. Their mission became a siege. For 18 hours, those 6 men held off 700. They fought with such ferocity that the enemy thought they were facing a company, not a squad. They were bombed, shot, and overrun multiple times, yet they refused to break. They saved that pilot, but the cost was absolute. The general's gaze swept across the stunned faces in the lounge. The official record says all 6 men were killed in action. Their story was classified for 40 years. They were ghosts. Their names are not on any public memorial. They were denied their glory in the name of national security. They asked for nothing and they gave everything. This man's jacket isn't filthy, you arrogant fool, he roared, now glaring directly at Sterling, whose face had turned the color of ash. It's a testament to a life of hardship you can't even begin to comprehend. His silence isn't weakness. It's the discipline of a man who has walked through hell and come out the other side with his soul intact. He isn't a security risk. He is the reason you have the freedom to sit here in your expensive suit and display your disgusting prejudice without fear of being dragged out into the street and shot. This man, and men like him, are the bedrock this entire country is built on. Sterling looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was shrinking, physically diminishing under the weight of the general's words and the stares of every other person in the room. The general wasn't finished. He took another step toward Jedediah, his posture softening from anger to pure, undiluted respect. He stopped directly in front of the old man's chair, and then Major General Peterson, a 2-star flag officer in the United States Air Force, a man who commanded thousands, snapped his body to the sharpest, most perfect position of attention of his life. His back was a steel rod. His chin was tucked. In the utter silence of the lounge, he raised his right hand, fingers perfectly straight, and rendered a slow, deliberate salute. The motion was crisp, powerful, and filled with a reverence that was almost palpable. Lieutenant Commander David Grant, without a moment's hesitation, stepped up beside the general and did the same, his own salute a mirror image of his superiors. The 2 security guards, both of whom were veterans themselves, one Army, one Marine, looked at each other for a split second, a silent communication passing between them. Their professional duty was forgotten. replaced by a much older, deeper one. They, too, snapped to attention and saluted the old man in the flannel shirt. The 4 men stood there, a silent honor guard holding their salutes in the middle of a first-class airport lounge. The other passengers were frozen, many with tears welling in their eyes. The scene was surreal, powerful, a moment of profound truth cutting through the mundane reality of travel. For the first time, Jedediah's composure broke. He looked at the saluting men, at the general, at the young Navy SEAL, and his pale blue eyes glistened. A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the weathered lines of his cheek. He slowly, with a hand that trembled ever so, slightly, raised it to his forehead. It wasn't the sharp, precise salute of a soldier on parade, but a tired, grateful acknowledgement. A gesture from one warrior to another, across the vast expanse of years and wars and sorrows. He held it for a moment, his eyes connecting with General Peterson's, and in that look, 1,000 volumes were exchanged. Then he slowly lowered his hand. The general and the others lowered theirs in unison. General Peterson dismissed Sterling with a single, withering look. "Get out of my sight," he said, his voice flat and cold. Sterling, utterly broken, turned and practically fled the lounge, a pariah in a place where he had, minutes before, considered himself king. The general pulled up a chair and sat down next to Jedediah, his movements now gentle, respectful. Grant did the same on the other side. "Sir," the general said softly, all the thunder gone from his voice, "my name is Frank Peterson. It is an honor I never imagined I would have. The world, thought you were all gone." Jedediah finally spoke again, his voice still raspy but clear. "The others are," he said simply. "They were the real heroes. I just got lucky." He looked down at his gnarled hands. "I came back, but I never really left that hill." Grant leaned forward. "Sir, how did you—" He didn't know how to finish the question. "How did you survive? How did you get out? How have you lived with this for 50 years in silence?" Jedediah gave a small, sad smile. "Walked. For a long time. A very long time." The 3 men sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, an island of shared understanding in the bustling airport. The general's aide quietly approached and handed Jedediah a new boarding pass. "Sir, the airline has upgraded you to Global First. You'll have a private suite." Jedediah just nodded, accepting the ticket without looking at it. Grant flagged down Chloe, the attendant, who was now crying softly near the bar. "Could we get this gentleman a fresh coffee, please? And maybe a hot meal?" he asked gently. She nodded eagerly, grateful for a way to make amends. As she scurried off, Jedediah looked at Grant. "You a SEAL?" Grant nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good men," Jedediah said. "I've heard." He then looked at the general. "Air Force saved our bacon more than once." The general smiled. "We try, sir. We try." They sat there, 3 warriors from 3 different generations, bound by a common oath and an unspoken understanding of sacrifice. The Christmas Eve flight to San Diego would be delayed, Grant knew, but he didn't care. He was exactly where he needed to be, bearing witness to a quiet miracle, a ghost from Christmas past who had finally, after a lifetime in the shadows, been brought into the light.